Hey, this is Rick from In Front of IT. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to go over how to install and set up Oh My Zsh with some powerful plugins and add-ons. But in this case, we'll be setting it up in Windows 10 inside an Ubuntu WSL2 installation. Whether you're interested in being a developer or systems administrator, Oh My Zsh is something you should strongly consider using. And I guarantee, once you start using it, you'd never want to use bash as your command line shell again. Oh My Zsh is a popular open source framework for managing your zsh shell configuration, making it easy to customize your terminal and enhance your productivity, whether you're doing coding, systems administration with ad hoc commands, or even coding in VS Code and debugging your code in VS Code's built-in terminal. All of this is possible. In fact, for me, the majority of command line work I do in Windows is running my Oh My Zsh shell, not Windows command line or PowerShell. This allows me to have the compatibility of Windows for graphical applications and the flexibility and power of all the Linux tools I need. In this video, I'll walk you through the step-by-step process of installing Oh My Zsh on your system. I'll go over everything from installing the necessary dependencies to configuring your newly installed zsh shell environment. By the end of this video, you'll be up and running with Oh My Zsh, and you should be ready to start customizing your terminal further with your own research to suit your needs. So whether you're a seasoned Linux user who's used bash for years, or you're just getting started with the command line, watch this video and learn how to take your terminal productivity to the next level. Let's get in front of it. First thing we're going to do is log into the system, and as always, I recommend we're going to check for updates in Windows. And going into settings and Windows Update, we see that the system is up to date already, so we got nothing to do here. Next step is to install Windows Terminal. Now in Windows 10 there are several ways to do this. We're just going to take the easiest route, which will install it for your account. We're going to go into the Microsoft Store and we're going to install it from there. So let's go ahead and do that. So go ahead and open up the Microsoft Store, and in the search bar on the top, we're going to type in Windows Terminal. Once you do that, you'll see two terminal versions come up, or at least I did. We have the Windows Terminal and the Windows Terminal Preview. I believe the Windows Terminal Preview is kind of the beta version where they release updates and new features first. So in this case, since we just want to use the stable edition, we're just going to choose the normal Windows Terminal one, which is for general production use. So assuming we don't have it installed already, click on Get, and that should start the download and installation process. So let's do that. Based on your internet speed, it shouldn't take more than a minute or two to install max. Once you do that, you'll see that Get button will change to an Open button. So if you click on the Open button, it should open up Windows Terminal. At that point, we can close the Windows Store. We're done with that. Now by default, it's going to open up Windows PowerShell. That's what we're going to be changing. That's the default shell for Windows Terminal. We're going to be changing that from PowerShell to zsh. So we'll start doing that. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and pin the Windows Terminal icon to the taskbar. That way you can just click in the taskbar to start it up. Now that's my personal preference. You don't have to do that. You could put it on your desktop if you want, or just have it in your start menu. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that here, but I like having it on the taskbar. So that's what I'm doing now. The next thing we're going to do is open up a Ubuntu command prompt. So you'll have this option to start the Ubuntu prompt if you have it installed in Windows. If not, I have another video that I'll link below where you can install it, and then you could come back to this video. And as you can see, it starts up your basic Ubuntu command prompt with bash going. And this is what we're going to be changing to Oh My Zsh. As you can see, clicking on the plus button would just bring up another PowerShell by default. And as we said, we want to change that to an Ubuntu default. So let's go ahead and do that. Click on the drop down arrow and choose settings. As soon as you click on it, the first option you have there is default profile, and as you can see, it says Windows PowerShell. Go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and change it from Windows PowerShell to Ubuntu. Now in my case, I have two of them, so I'm going to choose the one with the Ubuntu icon next to it. It doesn't really matter, they both go to Ubuntu, and we're going to change one of them anyway, but I choose the one with the icon. So doing that now, when you click on the plus button, you'll now have a new Ubuntu prompt that starts up instead of PowerShell. Next step is to install a font in Windows that will be used in Windows Terminal to support Oh My Zsh. The package is called Firacode NF, and NF stands for Nerd Fonts. So this font has special icons and glyphs that are needed by the Oh My Zsh team. So let's go ahead and get that. The website, which I'll link below, is www.nerdfonts.com. So go ahead and type that in the browser. You can scroll down or search, and we're looking for the Firacode Nerd font, just like what's on the screen. When you get to that, go ahead and click on download. So the file that you grab is a zip file. You can use whatever tool you want, such as 7-zip or just Windows Explorer, but the main goal is to get out the font files that are named with Windows compatible. So you'll have some that say mono, Windows compatible, and some that just say Windows compatible. You want both. So grab all those files. It should be about 8 or 10, and just drop them in a directory. So I'm dropping them in the downloads directory so I could install them from there. There's different ways to install the fonts into Windows. The easiest way I find that seems to work immediately is to go into settings and then fonts and drop your files into that font settings window. So that's what we're going to do here. Click on the start menu, then on settings, and in the search bar just type in fonts, and the first thing that should come up is font settings. So we'll go ahead and click on that. In font settings, you should see the window like on the screen that just allows you to drag and drop the files, the font files, into it to install them. So go ahead and click on them all and drop them in. It should take about a minute or so to install them. It might look like the system's freezing, but it's just processing the fonts and adding them to the cache. So give it some time. After it's completed, go ahead in the search bar and type in the word Firacode so we can verify that the font's installed. You should see two fonts come up once you type it in, as on the screen. One is just the normal font, and one is the mono font. The one that has NFM is the mono font. The other one's the normal multi-width font. The mono font specifically is the one that we'll be using in Windows Terminal. The regular one is one that you can use in programs like VS Code or other development programs or text programs. Once you confirm the fonts are installed, you could go ahead and close the settings window. And we're done with this step, and we'll move on to the next one. Next step, we're going to be configuring the terminal with the Firacode font we just installed. So let's go ahead and start up a Windows Terminal session. So clicking on Windows Terminal based on the steps we did before should start up a new Ubuntu session. But we're going to go into the drop down and we're going to choose settings. Once in settings, to the left, choose the profile that matches the Ubuntu session. If you've been following this video, it should be the Ubuntu with the orange icon. So let's click on that. Once you click on that, you should scroll down to the appearance bar at the bottom and expand that. Going in there, the first thing we're going to change is the color scheme. Now this is totally personal preference. You can go through the different themes, which will change the color of your Windows shell session. I'm just not a fan of the purple color, which is Ubuntu's signature color. So I'm going to choose one of the other ones, but you can choose whichever one you like. Once you've done that, the next setting we're going to change is font face. The default should be Cascadia Mono, but if you click on the drop down, it'll show you all the monospace fonts that you have installed. That's the type of font you want to use because that keeps the spacing of the letters even from line to line, which is good for programs that you run that might need to show lines on top of each other, like top or certain commands where the spacing is important. So you can click the checkbox to choose show all fonts, but I'm not going to do that. We're going to be choosing the Firacode font. So go ahead and click the drop down and choose Firacode Mono as your font. You'll see it's called Firacode NFM, and there's also a Firacode NFM Retina. I have a 4K window and I'm running this in a virtual machine, but technically you can choose whichever one you want. I don't think it makes much of a difference, but worst case, if it doesn't look like it should, if you pick one, choose the other one. The important thing here is that you choose one of these fonts for your session. Next thing we're going to do is change the font size. Again, this is totally up to your personal preference. I don't like the size 13. I think it's a little big and I like to see more characters per line on my screen, so I'm shrinking it down to 11. But again, you can go ahead and play with this and see what settings best for you. Below that is the font weight. Again, more or less, this is personal preference. Typically, I leave it on normal myself, but you can change it to whatever you want. And again, go into it, change it, try it out, and see which ones you like. The other setting I usually change is transparency, which basically just puts some transparency in your session so you can see what's behind it. Again, like all the other settings except the font, this is personal preference. So that's the general theme of this. There's no set rules other than using the Firacode NF font for this. Everything else is kind of personal preference. You'll see why we need the Firacode NF font later in the video. Any of these other settings, feel free to play around with them and set them to your liking. As you can see on my screen, the transparency, it shows some of the icons behind it. Again, that's just my personal preference, what I like. So what I'm doing here is just testing out the font. I just typed in the line 5 is greater than or equal to 4. And as you can see, I typed the greater than symbol followed by the equal symbol, and it automatically changed it to a greater than and equal symbol that you would see in math class, for example. And that's the nice feature about this font that I like. Even using it in Visual Studio Code and other programming programs, it will put the proper symbol for double equals, less than or equal, greater than or equal, not equal. And so that's why I use this font. Once you confirm the font is working, you can close the settings window and then type exit in the Ubuntu shell to exit out. And we're done with this step. You now have the terminal configured to use Firacode, so we can move on to the next step. Now we're going to actually install Oh My Zsh. So the first thing we want to do is open up another terminal prompt. If you don't have one, open up already to your Ubuntu shell. And we're going to update the Ubuntu installation with the command sudo apt update. Once the update is done, we're going to follow it up by upgrade to actually upgrade the Ubuntu packages. Once the upgrade is done, we're going to go ahead and start installing the dependencies. The first ones we need is Git and zsh. So Git is used by Oh My Zsh to perform updates, to actually clone the code, etc. And zsh is the actual shell that Oh My Zsh runs on. So that's going to be your replacement shell for bash. Right now you're using bash. We're going to be replacing it with zsh and then installing Oh My Zsh, which installs tools, themes, etc. to enhance the zsh. So we do that by typing in the command sudo apt install git space zsh, and then I just put a -y so it doesn't prompt me, to install. It'll just do it automatically. Once Git and zsh is installed, we're going to copy the installation script for Oh My Zsh by running the command that I'm putting on the screen. Don't worry about trying to type it. I'll put it in the description so you could cut and paste it into your own shell and run it. Once you hit enter, you'll see it cloning the code into your home directory. And then it's going to ask you if you want to change your default shell to zsh. So let's go ahead and do that here. You type Y to change it. It'll ask you for your sudo password, so you go ahead and type that in. Now you're going to see that your shell has changed. This is the default shell prompt for zsh. Don't worry, this is not how it's going to look in the end. It's going to have a whole bunch of information and graphics and other enhancements. At this point, we're done with the installation of Oh My Zsh. Now we're going to work on configuring it in the next step. Next up, we got to configure Oh My Zsh so it's actually usable. Let's go ahead and do that. Step one is editing the .zshrc file in your home directory. I use VI for this. You can use Nano or whatever editor you prefer. Now this file will have all the configuration settings that are needed for Oh My Zsh to be configured correctly anytime you start it up. Let's go ahead and go in that file. Once we're in the file to edit, the first thing we're going to do is change the line zsh theme equals Robbie Russell, and we're going to change that to zsh theme equals agnoster, typing it the same way you see on the screen. And I'll add the theme name in the description below so that you can get it correct. And this is not going to be the final theme. The final theme we're going to use is Powerlevel10k, but just to get a theme that we can look at and see some information like our username in, for now we're going to change it to agnoster until we install Powerlevel10k. Next, we're going to enable one of the Oh My Zsh update options. There's disabled, where it never updates. You would have to do it manually. There's auto, where when there's a new update, Git will automatically pull it down and install it. And then there's a reminder, where it tells you that there's an update and asks you if you want to update. I like to have a bit of control on my shell because there have been some instances, one case I think, where an update broke my shell. So I like to do it manually, so I choose reminder, and it will just prompt you when there's an update, and you can just choose yes to install it or no not to install it. But you can choose the one that you would like. Next thing I'm enabling is turning on timestamp on the history command. So history is a command you type in if you're not familiar with it that will show you all the commands you've previously run in your previous shells. Oh My Zsh allows you to turn on timestamp so you can see when that command is run. This is optional. By default, it won't show that. I find that useful, so I'm enabling it. Next up is enabling plugins. By default, the Git plugin is enabled, and I'm adding the sudo plugin, which just allows you to press escape twice on a command and will insert sudo in front of whatever command you have. Oh My Zsh has a ton of plugins. I'll put the link in the description to the list of plugins so you can find the ones that will be useful for you. But for this exercise, we're just going to start off with these two. At the end of the file, I'm just putting in a couple of aliases that I've gotten into the habit of adding to my configuration files. One is aliasing VI to VIM. I think there's another way to do it in Oh My Zsh, but I just do it this way. So when I type VI, it'll start up VIM instead. The other one that I've used ever since using Red Hat is the LL command. We'll alias to LS with a bunch of options that show additional information on each file. So these two I always put in. You can see them on the screen. If you want to put them in your file, you make sure any aliases you want to put in, you put them at the end of the file. Once you're done editing the file, we save the file. And at the command prompt, I'm going to type source.zshrc, and what that does is reload that zshrc file without having to exit out of my shell and back in. And as you can see, once I do that, the prompt changes to this agnoster theme prompt, and just run some commands to make sure they work, and specifically the LL command, which I added an alias for. As you can see, it shows a full listing of the directory with file sizes, date stamps, permissions, and additional information. So we're done configuring Oh My Zsh. Now we're going to go ahead and install Powerlevel10k. We'll do that next. So now we're going to install Powerlevel10k. If you don't have an Ubuntu shell open already, go ahead and open one. And you're going to paste in the following git command so that you can download Powerlevel10k. Don't worry about typing it, I will have it in the description. But before we do that, let's backtrack a bit and let's make sure the zsh custom variable is set. Now that should be set by default once you install Oh My Zsh, but better safe than sorry. And we check that by typing in echo space $, capital ZSH underscore custom, like you see on the screen. And it should return back a path that's inside your home directory. As you can see, for me, it's inside the .o-my.zsh/custom in my home directory. Should be similar for you. If it is, now we can safely paste the command and download Powerlevel10k. Once that's done, we got to go back into the .zshrc file. So again, I'll be using VI. You can use whatever editor you're comfortable with. You're going to find a line that says zsh_theme equals agnoster, and we're going to take out agnoster and replace that with Powerlevel10k/Powerlevel10k. We have to do that just because of the directory structure and the way that Git cloned the source. Once you make the change, go ahead and save the file. And then once you save the file, go ahead and exit your Windows terminal and then start it up again by clicking on it. Once the Windows terminal starts up, you're going to see a prompt and some instructions about configuring Powerlevel10k. It's going to ask you about certain graphical icons that are showing up. And this is where the Firacode NF font that we installed, the nerd font, a while ago, comes into play. It allows those graphics to be shown correctly in your shell. So you will go ahead and start going through the prompts and answering them as you see fit. If you're not seeing the graphical icons that it's asking about in the prompts, that means your shell is either not set up for Firacode NF font or you don't have it installed. You have to go back earlier in the video to do that. It'll ask you about various icons, and then it will get to the type of prompt that you want. So for prompt style, I'm choosing number 3, rainbow. The next question is about the character set. Here I always choose Unicode. I don't see any reason to choose ASCII in this case, so go ahead and choose that. Next option is whether you want to show the current time. And if you do want to show it, what format you want to show it in. So just pick whichever option you want here. Next option is prompt separator. I believe I chose angled here. And then pick your preference for prompt heads and prompt tails and prompt height. All of these are personal preference. For this prompt height one, if you choose one line, the text and the commands that you type in will be in between the two headers. If you choose 2 lines, it'll be underneath. I like 2 lines myself, so I choose that. For prompt connection, I choose disconnected. Again, choose whichever one you want. And for prompt frame, I choose full. And color, make your choice. Prompt spacing, I typically choose sparse when I do this. And for icons, I choose many icons. Main reason being, if you're going to be developing on the system and using Git, those icons come in handy in terms of showing commands being run or the status of your Git code, whether it's synced up with your master, as you can see in the examples here, or if it's not, and also what type of Linux OS you're running. So these icons come in handy. I would recommend choosing 2. Prompt flow is how much details, additional words, and context you want in the prompt. I choose 1 here typically. I don't need the extra on master or took 5 seconds for the commands or anything like that. So I typically choose number 1, concise. For transient prompt, what that means is, will it show a new prompt for every single command you type? Or are you okay with if you type a quick succession of commands that it doesn't introduce that prompt in between? And I typically choose enable transient prompt, the yes option. I don't need to see the prompt for every command I'm typing in. It's okay if it's just in between commands. And it typically shows up pretty regularly anyway. Instant prompt mode is when the shell first starts up. If there's any issues with the prompt, it will give verbose instructions, I believe, or issues of what's going on. So I typically choose the recommended option, verbose. There are some times where if you have an issue with a plugin or some type of setup, or a plugin needs network connectivity, you don't have it, it might become a nuisance. You can turn it off, but typically I leave it on. Next up is going to ask you if you want to apply these changes to .zshrc. I always choose yes here because I am not interested in doing it myself, since this already prompted me through it. If you want to start over and ask the questions again, or you don't want to make your changes, you can choose quit or restart, but in this case, we'll be choosing yes. After choosing yes, you'll see the config file that is saved, also the backup of the zshrc file. Now, if you wanted to, let's say a week later, go through and recustomize your settings and go through the prompt again, all you would have to do is delete or rename that .p10k.zsh file. And once you do that, it will see Powerlevel10k will act as if it's the first time you've run it, and it will ask you all those questions again. That's the quickest and easiest way to be able to redo it. And as you can see, your prompt changes to the settings that you went through with the prompts. Now that Powerlevel10k is installed, we're pretty much done at this point. All we're going to do now is install a couple of additional useful Oh My Zsh plugins that don't come standard with it, that you have to download and install. So we're going to do that now. So next step is run sudo apt install command. And we're going to run that and install two packages, zsh-autosuggestions and zsh-syntax-highlighting. These two are Oh My Zsh add-ons that enhance the command prompt. After those packages are installed, we're going to set up what they call symbolic links that point in your local customs directory to where those packages are installed. Think of a symbolic link in Linux as a shortcut to an application on your Windows desktop. Basically the same type of thing. To do that, you switch to your home directory if you're not in there already, as I'm doing on my screen, and then from there, you're going to switch into the .o-my.zsh/custom/plugins directory. And we do that using the cd command. Once in that directory, you're going to use the ln command, as I'm doing on the screen, to link the plugins directory and user/share to this directory. You type it as seen above. I'll also have these commands in the description. And as you can see, when I type ll, the links are there. Now switch back to the home directory, and we're going to edit the .zshrc file one last time. Because of the way these plugins are installed, we cannot put them in that plugins setting where we added git and sudo to. We have to run these plugins directly from their script files. So that's what these two source lines that I'm adding to the configuration file will do. Once you add them to the file, just make sure that they go after the line that's highlighted, the source zsh-o-my-zsh.sh. I put them before, but they should go after that entry so that they get the settings that they need. Once you're done, go ahead and save the file and you can exit. And as you can see here, what the plugins do, the syntax highlighting will actually have letters show up as red until the command is a valid command. That way you're helped out knowing whether the command you're typing is a valid one or not. The auto suggestions will pre-populate the remaining part of a command with a previous command that you used. So for example, as you can see, as I'm typing these commands, they start filling out the additional letters. History, sudo, etc. And that is it. At this point, we configured and installed Oh My Zsh. We also configured Powerlevel10k and additional plugins. This was a long one, but if you found this video helpful, please mention that in the comments and like and subscribe. Let me also know in the comments if there's any other videos or instructionals you want to see on trying to set up a home lab or a dev workstation or dev laptop. And I'll be happy to walk through it, check it out, and take a look at it and try and get something out for you. This is Rick with In Front of IT. Thanks for watching. Peace.